Iké Udé is a Nigerian-American photographer, performance artist, author, and publisher. He is best known for his conceptual photographic portraits that explore issues of representation and sexual, gender, cultural, and stylistic identity. He began his art career in the late 1980s with abstract painting and drawing. Since the 1990s, photography has been his primary medium. Iké Udé explores a world of dualities such as African post-nationalist, photographer performance artist, artist spectator, male-female, mainstream marginal, seduction narcissism, and fashion art. So, I'm quite intrigued with, your uses of evidence, the work you did about the uses of evidence work you did. So could you tell me more about it?
Well, that was the work I did at Guggenheim Museum in 1996.
Yes.
And it was a landmark exhibition in that it was the first time that contemporary African image, African representation, and African photography was shown in the West on that level at the Guggenheim Museum in New York. It charted or tracked African photography or African imagery in photography from 1940 to present. And the present then was 1996. Yeah, so it was a landmark exhibition. And for the exhibition, I didn't have anything that I thought would make the case conceptually in terms of the African representations in the popular imaginary. And so I tapped into the Igbo cosmology of binarism, of Iruka and Azuka, if you like. I mean, literally, that's what inspired that piece. It was the concept of Iruka and Azuka. So for that piece, it was made of a cube, which measures, for those of you who understand feet and inches, it measures 4 feet at all sides and 8 feet high on all sides. And the architect who designed it for me, each side had a cut-out window to see what is inside. So there were different levels in consideration for people who are shorter or children, and even somebody on a wheelchair. So one side had the cut-out window on a level with somebody on a wheelchair to be able to engage in looking towards in the interior or the Azuka, right, as it were. So the Iruka, the outside of the cube, were a collage of the stock images of the African that you see in Western media. It was culled, C-U-L-L-E-D, culled from Western media, literally, New York Times, Time Magazine, National Geographic, literally
stereotype, the normal stereotype.
Yeah, just scan all those images because they're evidences. I didn't have to manufacture them. I just scanned them, collaged them, and use them as a wallpaper. So when you see the installation on all sides, you have these like wild images of drought-stricken Ethiopians, Sudanese. There's even an image one time of a vulture basically waiting for a starving Ethiopian kid to die in order to devour the corpse or the carcass. So all this image, and of course this like chaotic, senseless civil wars that that obtains in Africa as well. So I had it everything all collage. Basically, all the images that you see out. There was even a cover of Time magazine that says it has a chimpanzee or gorilla. I think it was a gorilla on the cover, and it said inside a place that no human being has been. So you have all these kind of images, right? So that's what you see on the outside. And of course, giraffe, the safari images as well, of course, you know, it's there, giraffe, lion, elephants, and what have you. And actually, you see that from the outside, the animals are more well-known than African people.
Yes, definitely.
They even have names in some instances, the animals. They have families, not the African people at all. And then the dichotomy, if you like, the binary, when you look through inside, I had also, I have a very vast archival photographic collections of African lives. I had chosen some of them and framed them very beautifully. So when you look inside, you can see a very tranquil, very calm, elegant, civilized, civil, domestic lives of African writers, designers, and some of them were members of my family as well. And it was in sharp, alarming contrast with what you saw outside the cube. So, and that basically, that piece was singled out by the New York Times critic, Holland Carter, as having summed up the exhibition. So that is the long and short of uses of evidence.
And if something like that came up again, what would you focus on, being the kind of how the world has evolved up till now, most especially from last year?
Nothing has changed. I think the image of Africa is still the same in
Still the same,
in the
yeah.
media. It's even worse actually. It's not like it's changed. It's still about disease and Ebola and the new Ebola strain and civil war and mayhem and disaster.
I find it really fascinating that you're using the core Igbo cosmology of dualities and showing one side and then the other side. And then that brings me on to Sartorial Anarchy. I'm really interested in that, and how you blend things together to that people wouldn't normally associate.
I think that's kind of autobiographical, in the sense that the Sartorial Anarchy is very indicative of my temperament. And to quote the 19th century Victorian writer Walter Pater, who is one of my favorite writers, I love his prose. There was this phrase he used, it's called the Great Refusal. And by the Great Refusal, it means not acquiescing to any orthodoxy. It means not acquiescing to left ideology or right ideology, to this or that, to here or there, but to kind of walk in the middle and acknowledging the various binaries and divides and competing ideologies rather than choosing sides. So working with that framework, it gave me the also artistic liberty and license to quote different men's costumes or clothing and accessories across nationality / geographies and across time. So per a portrait, I would quote different attires ranging from Asia to Africa to Europe, and also from different time periods, even sometimes a reproduction of like Renaissance Italian outfit, it married with a Yoruba or Igbo outfit, combined with an Austrian jacket and a French high-heeled shoes that's worn by the Sun King, Louis the 14th or so, the Sun King. He wore this like high heels actually. Began actually then the men were wearing high heels before the women actually.
Yes, yes.
In the French court with the red heels. Yeah. So I was quoting different sartorial men's sartorial endeavors and manifestations across the ages and across different nations. So again, the title, as is so often the case with my work, and as so often the case with Igbo names tell a story. So the titles of my work also is very Igbo in its inclination. It's in the sense that the title of my work actually frames the very core and concept and essence of what I'm doing each time. So you have the sartorial part is about elegance, about clothing, and about various insignia, various cultural markers, various symbols and metaphors that we invest in what we wear. So that is the sartorial part of it. On the anarchy part of it, it's typically people dress according to their time period, according to their generation, according to their nation, their religion, their class. In this instance, I erase a blackboard, I level the field, and combine things regardless of nationality, regardless of geography, regardless of rank, regardless of any symbolic cultural meaning it had before, and use it to compose these self-portraitures. So, and the key thing is that I was trying to find a way that, because typically we regard differences as a huge problem. Oftentimes, not just among the Igbo, but just in general, or even Igbos less so. Oftentimes, differences is made an issue. In Sartorial Anarchy, I did demonstrate, hopefully successfully, I think successfully because the work has been well received. I was able to successfully demonstrate that one can reconcile differences, regardless of nationality or time period, by finding
common lines,
by finding a very wonderful equilibrium and hence to harmonize the differences, to assuage it, to recompose it. You see, yeah. So I did aim to reconcile differences rather than making difference or difference is an impasse or an issue or a negative, as it were.
So before we go into your work with Nollywood, how important, because I know it's a big thing, you know, the representation part. But how, and you said things haven't changed since, you know, you did uses of evidence. But what are people not doing about this representation, you know, bringing a more positive picture of Africa to the world?
Well, I think I shall attempt to answer your question twofold. There are people who are doing something to address this issue of representation, or better yet, misrepresentations, if you like. But it's only a handful. It's happening on an individual level. It's not, it hasn't reached a critical mass where it does matter. You find too that key to addressing this misrepresentation, if you like, is Africans having a truly media hegemony, not BBC Igbo or BBC Hausa or BBC TV or Benin or BBC Wolof or whatever. That is not media hegemony. I'm talking about us having our own BBC that we created. So this way we can propagate and own authorship and the big microphone to propagate and disseminate
the medium we want. Yeah,
exactly. And we don't have that. We simply don't have a New York Times equivalent. We don't have BBC equivalent. I don't know what in France it's like Le Monde, I think it's called in France. Yeah, we don't have those. You know, Voice of America or say Voice of Africa. No, we don't have such things.
So, and then we rely on them to tell our stories, which is not.
Yeah, and quite frankly too, you know, in the 19th century, they used to address Africa, the colonial masters used to address Africans as a children's race. And as it might seem bad demeaning to call us a children's race, but I think there's a lot of truth in those. I think Africans in general we tend to think and act like children. We're always happy, we're always dancing, drinking and laughing as everything is fine, you know, and we don't really seriously look at how we are being depicted. It's like, almost like, oh, it's nothing. It's nothing. We know who, you know, we know who we are, and it doesn't matter. It's very kind of cavalier about it. We take it for granted. So just like children, you know. So I think that there's a lot of truth in that sense. There's a lot of truth that African people are like a children's race, because most other races will not tolerate what African people tolerate, and still have time to dance and laugh and pretend as though everything is fine.
And it also spreads to every part of you know, sort of our lives and our cultures, because there's nothing like curating memories, or there's no, you know, strict, you know, way of recording things or keeping things for, you know, people to refer to. So it's, even though, as you said, individuals are trying, but there's no concerted effort on the higher levels to, you know, sort of get what we want together in a place for people to refer to as a reference.
Because hence a children's race.
Yes, yes, you're right.
Hopefully, when we become adults, we can do exactly what you just said and earn the respect of the international community. but for the most part, we are a children's race. We have very reckless, irresponsible leadership, very ignorant and indifferent masses who don't really care, and the list goes on. It's crazy.
So how did you start thinking about your work with Nollywood?
Well, Nollywood actually was circling back to the interior of the work, use of evidence that I did in '96. The interior, the Azoka, right? So you have the Iruka, and then I went back again to expand. So literally, Nollywood portraiture is an extension of the Azoka part of the 1996 uses of evidence, right?
So that's uses of evidence 2.0.
2.0 to show how African people are like, and to be the author of that as well, right? But to show a contemporary African people, but using the Nollywood stars and talents and the industry as a vehicle to make a case for a new contemporary African image, both aspirational and as evidenced.
Out of the ones you did, which was the most out of the Nollywood collection?
Yeah.
Which is the one that you really, really like? I know it's like asking a mother which what child is your favorite child, but I had to just ask.
So
I have one personal favorite.
So which is your favorite?
The group one.
Or the group picture?
That group picture is, oh my goodness, it's, in all the splendor. The individual ones, I like them for different reasons, but seeing it all there, it just like hits you between the eyes. It's
quite powerful, the group picture. The group picture actually is named, is called the School of Nollywood.
Oh.
Yeah. Have you got the book, by the way?
No, I haven't.
Oh, we have to send you the book. Okay. Yeah, it's also available on Amazon.com.
I didn't even know it was. I didn't realize it was available on
yeah, it's a very large, oversized book. And it had to be in very good shape to lift it up. It's quite heavy. No expense was spared to produce it. It's so luxuriously produced and beautiful. Finest quality paper, ink, layout, just beautiful. Yeah, you can get a copy on Amazon, actually.
And I'll get you to sign it when we meet up.
Yeah, and you can get one for free in the black market. So for the group picture, the group portraiture, it's called the School of Nollywood. And it was inspired by Raphael was one of the three triumvirates of Michelangelo, Da Vinci, and Raphael during the Renaissance, right, Italy. So he did this wonderful mural wall piece that is at the Vatican. It's called the School of Athens. And that was during when Europe were emerging from the Dark Ages, and they were transitioning from the Dark Ages to the Renaissance, the rebirth. So, and it was very aspirational, where he's saying to them, we can be like the ancient Athenians. We can be like the ancient Romans who built all this wonder that was lost during the Dark Ages, right? So conversely, I saw that the industry that is Nollywood is particularly very, very important. Unlike anything that's been out of Africa since the pyramids, we have individual people like Chinua Achebe, Soyinka, who've won a prize here and there, but collectively we haven't really had a very impactful cultural. We haven't been a very impactful cultural force at a very huge number like Nollywood. That was in 2014, and as you know right now, Netflix is in bed with Nollywood. They just going crazy about Nollywood, as you know. That was recently.
They're
But
heavily into
yeah.
Nollywood now.
But I had already like foregrounded this. I saw it coming already. And so I wish there was a Nigerian or African equivalent of Netflix who are doing this with Nollywood, as opposed to say an American company.
Yes, yes.
There
because
there
was one iROCO, or
yeah,
I don't
but
know.
it's not Netflix. That it's not Netflix.
Yeah, it's not. So we really need to work on,
exactly.
And again, like you said, relying again on.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, because we're children, you know. Yeah, we have.
Yeah, we're relying on them to dictate what they show, and
precisely. Yeah. And so going back to Nollywood and the group picture and the concept, because my work is mostly conceptual photography. The concept is far more important than what you see. Equally, I try to make the visual as beautiful as the concept, but the conceptual thrust is so
and that's
vital.
where you put in the work.
Yeah. So conceptually, it was designed to or framed to serve the same purpose, and even better yet, to serve the same determined purpose that Raphael's School of Athens served, and to be an aspirational catalyst to people to look at this and say, here we have an army of people, 64 strong, look at them, you know, we can do it as a group, not as individuals, right? Which is why you like the group portraiture than say the individual ones, because we need this critical mass of people, like I was saying before.
We do.
It's not just one person there, one person there. Even if a Nigerian writer or actress win an Oscar award, it doesn't. We don't own Hollywood. It just won an Oscar award, and that's it. It doesn't make any critical difference on the ground, really, right? So. So the group picture was designed as such, and the size, which is 27 feet width by 17 feet approximately in height. It's like a huge room. It's the same size as Raphael's mural at the Vatican, basically. So it's a very massive piece. And that took me a year to finish the composition in terms of post-production. Yeah, I worked on this like, I even built a special table that I could push a button and the table would rise up, and I could stand working, and then I can also have it lowered so I can work sitting down, just alternate, because it was very, very labor intensive, working on it. And also, when you sit for a long, long time, it's not good because it can induce blood clot. So it was very intense work. Yeah.
So did you have periods of like moving away from it to recharge your batteries and coming back to it?
Yeah. So what I was doing is that I would work on the single portraits, and I'd take a break, and I come back to the group one, and I go back and forth. Yeah, you have to do that. Absolutely, you have to do that. Yeah. So
everything really that we've talked about in representation boils down to us owning the mediums that we will use to push out the narrative.
Indeed, yeah. being in charge of the
Channels.
media or the channels with which to propagate the African image, message of all sorts, is the importance can't be overstated, because if you look at other races, that's what they're doing. You know, even the ones who were once at the same level of backwardness as Africans, they've far surpassed us, China, South Korea, what have you, in Asian countries in particular. And it's very doable. This is not even like rocket science, very doable, just that we don't make the concerted effort. It's not a priority for us. It's not urgent enough for us, because oftentimes we don't really care, and you know, our people invest so much time and energy
on
in
the wrong things.
in the church religion, and
Which was introduced.
yeah, and food and drinking and dancing. Yeah. So
There's this quote, I can't remember, but I can't remember who it came from, but something like rather than rent a stall, you might as well just buy the whole market and control what happens and what's being sold.
yes,
So
indeed.
what we're doing is really renting stalls.
Yeah, and also it's also very interesting too, because pre-colonial Igbo, you know, and for that matter, I'm not an expert on other African societies, but even Benin as well, the Edo as well, Ife, they were not this irresponsible. They were really, a lot of pre-colonial African people were really like
Focused and
focused and well organized, yeah, than the colonialized Africans and post-colonial.
So what do you think the problem was between the pre-colonial and post-colonial? What happened? What made the focus go?
Well, I think that we became like domesticated animals. They don't even have any confidence in themselves. They just entirely relied on you, the domesticator and whatever. So we've been terribly domesticated and miseducated as well. And also, it might sound sentimental, and I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a sentimental person, but at the risk of sounding like very, very sweet, you know what's also very, very lacking now amongst us Igbos and Africans at large is there's a paucity of love between ourselves. We are very self-loathing. We tend to be eager to fight amongst ourselves, to kill each other, even wantonly, to bicker around over petty things, and in doing so, we have this bizarre disunity amongst us. So if you have people who always fighting each other, who don't trust each other, who don't love each other, who don't forgive each other, you can't even do anything, because to do something as a group, you have to have mutual trust and
trust, yeah,
and have unity, right? If you do have trust and unity and love each other, then there is no stopping you. The sky is your limit, right? Because then you're all invested in the same thing because you love each other. We don't have, so African people are very self-loathing. Because they're very self-loathing, they hate each other. So it also goes back to the way we've been colonized. Yeah, we have, because of the colonial mind we have we don't like what we see in the mirror, because also the Western media, the colonial mirror shows us in a very bad way, in a very bad manner, that a lot of us internalize this negated self. So
it's like we keep pressing that self-destruct button.
Yeah, so the self-loathing is very, very profound, and we don't. I think what African need is the number of like kind of Oprah Winfrey style shows to just come on TV and discuss how messed up we are, you know, just I mean publicly really, and also we need some therapists. We are really messed up, because the level of self-loathing and self-hate amongst Africans is extraordinary, and that's why you don't have unity amongst them, which is why it's very easy for any outsider to come in and divide and conquer Africa. It's so easy because they hate each other anyway.
Hate each other, and that's why. And it's not even on a higher level, even in the most basic unit. Most basic unit, like family level, clan, village, town, it's all fanning out. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
the self-loathing.
Yeah. And also part of that's part of also why I did. Also, Nollywood was an act of love too. I went back to Nigeria after 30 years plus absent to do this portraiture. It was self-financed by me. I didn't make any penny from that. But to celebrate our people, to show them in the best light possible, to make them look beautiful for the world. And also the group portraiture that you liked is to show them the power of unity.
Unity,
well. Yes. So, and the Nigerian government hasn't shown any appreciation for this work. It's the Western museums and collectors.
Yeah. That's the whole, you know, the tragedy about this whole thing.
Yeah, it's crazy. If I was from Japan and I do this work for Japanese film industry, for example, I mean, the government will sponsor everything.
Sponsor everything, and then tell you to take on other subjects.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's where, you know, we are where we are. I'm just hoping that with this, you know, this chat we've had, people will start thinking inside themselves and start doing their own little, you know.
And also, I may also like to use this this opportunity to propose that that we have an Igbo think tank, and hopefully maybe at some point that would mushroom into a Nigerian think tank, an African think tank, like we have in the West and Asia, and they have their think tanks, you know, where you have smart people, and we can do this over Zoom and what have you. You don't have to have an office like the Brooks Institute and stuff like that, you know, to brainstorm and on a regular basis. That's very important. You know, we'll start with Igbo think tank, and then move to Nigerian think tank, and then to African think tank.
And spreads out.
Yeah. You know, before we have our New York Times and BBC, we can start from that level.
From the from a narrow level. Yeah. Okay.
It's one step at a time.
One step at a time.
I think that's Igbo proverb that said that one licks hot soup gently or gingerly.
Nwayọọ ka eji aracha ofe dị ọkụ.
Yes. Nwayọọ ka eji
aracha ofe dị ọkụ. Yeah. And that sums it up. I mean, I think, you know, our biggest problem is our priorities. Our biggest problem. Once we get our priorities right, then, you know, gradually. And that's the wire.
Yes. Like thereof, our priority is, we have priorities, but mostly some food, dance, and material, very vulgar material investments. and corruption as well. All these things are informed by the self-loathing. If you have a community that love themselves, there is no perfect world, right? But if you have, on the average, right, a community that cannot love themselves, they wouldn't go this extreme, this far of like really, really bastardizing their very own community.
Everything, their very essence.
Their very essence, exactly. Yeah, it's like rubbishing where you are living. It doesn't make any sense at all. You know, yeah.
Just to add to, before we end, can you touch on the work you did with Uli?
Okay, so I've actually did some work with Nsibidi and Uli. Nsibidi is this crypto language
writing system, yeah.
writing system. I did some work with Nsibidi.
Initial crypto, language.
Language, exactly. I did some work with Nsibidi, which hasn't been seen public. I did a magazine cover for a friend of mine at Hunter College. They use it for magazine cover. I use Nsibidi for that. But besides that, the Uli, as you know, it's a very, very important decorative art amongst the Igbo. They use it for wall and they use it for the skin. And my maternal grandmom had Uli tattooed on her body, and I recall that. So for my own purposes, I used it in a very, very stylized way to do nudes, and I thought that employing Uli to embellish in a very stylized manner these beautiful female forms would be very, very alluring, as well as lending the forms some unreadable mistake.
And it's very, very Google loves that one, the one with the back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you type Uli, is one of the things that comes up, your work.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So I actually got I knew that work before I met you. And then when I now realized it was you, I was like, wow.
Yeah, I've had a long practice since '91. I was a painter before I began to use photography, and then I've had a lot of evolution throughout my work, and I'm very, very restless. I'm always trying to do different things and new things all the time. Yeah.
And that's what makes you, unique, and because you can do what you do and stay static.
No, you can't. And increasingly, I'm going to be doing a lot of work in cinema, in movie, which is also, people forget too that movies is called movies because movies is literally moving pictures, moving photographs. When people watch movies, they forget that they're watching photographs. They don't realize that. It's very subconscious. But they're called movies because those are photographs that are in motion. So I want to explore movies more to do with its intrinsic value as a motion picture medium, more and less to do with Hollywood or Nollywood or Bollywood stuff. I just love the idea that you have this medium where the photographs moves as opposed to still. So stay tuned for my movies.
Thank you so much. This is just the start of more conversations.
I'm looking forward to more. Yes.